How many times have you believed you'd be loved simply for being good, for giving your all, for never saying no? Reality is cruel. The more you offer yourself, the less value you have. Machiavelli warned, politics is guided by reality, not ideals. And in the game of female desire, reality is even more ruthless. Love isn't won with blind devotion, but with power. The end justifies the means, especially when what's at stake isn't just someone's attention, but your own dignity. What almost no one dares to say is that being predictable kills desire. It's better to be feared than loved when respect is at stake. Because in practice, female desire doesn't bow to the man who bends, but to the one who knows how to set invisible boundaries, who maintains strategic silence, who never begs for space. Machiavelli called this virtue the silent strength that doesn't need approval to exist. And when this strength mixes with the fortune of a rare presence, the magnetism that many mistake for luck is born. Do you think flowers, messages, and promises win you over? Nonsense. True human nature shows otherwise. Excess suffocates, scarcity fascinates. The calculated use of force is knowing when to appear and when to disappear, when to reveal and when to remain silent. It's the art of becoming the prize, and prizes don't chase anyone. Prizes are fought over, desired, almost unattainable. And it's precisely this feeling of almost that keeps the flame burning. Make no mistake, this isn't a manual for manipulating women, but rather a way to reveal the brutal logic that drives desire. Just as a prince needs his own loyal armies, you need a dense, solid life that doesn't revolve around neediness. Constant adaptability, controlled coolness, and mystery aren't tricks, they're weapons. Weapons that protect you from being devoured by indifference and, at the same time, arouse fascination in those who dare approach you. Today, I'll expose the dark secrets Machiavelli never wrote for lovers, but which span centuries and still explain why some men inspire desire and others only compassion. Brace yourself. What you're about to hear isn't romantic, it's real. And precisely for that reason, it's powerful. Because when you understand that love, like politics, is a silent war, you'll never kneel again to be chosen. You become your own sovereign. All desire stems from a silent law. The more abundant something is, the less value it seems to have. Think of water in the desert and water from the tap, the same substance, but with completely different weights on the scales of the human mind. Machiavelli already suggested that politics is guided by reality, not ideals, and this reality also applies to the realm of affection. The end justifies the means when one understands that rarity creates magnetism. Those who offer themselves excessively become invisible, and those who know how to calibrate their presence achieve more than those who insist on begging for attention. Is it better to be feared than loved? Perhaps, but before being feared, one must be perceived as someone who carries virtù and fortuna, an inner density not found on every street corner. It's curious to note that, in love and relationships, many make the same mistake as the rulers Machiavelli criticized. They overdo their giving, believing that unlimited dedication will be enough to guarantee loyalty. But what happens in practice is the opposite. By failing to cultivate scarcity, they lose value, just as loyal armies of their own only arise from discipline and trust. The same occurs with those who wish to inspire respect and desire. Those who constantly chase after things communicate without realizing it that they lack inner power. And the politics of affection, as ruthless as that of thrones, punishes this imbalance with indifference. The key, therefore, is to become the prize. This doesn't mean being arrogant, but rather carving out a rich life, having projects, ambitions, hobbies, and silences that create a magnetic field around you. Authentic scarcity is an aphrodisiac because it stems from a true mission. It's avoiding being hated while also not giving in too easily. It's the calculated use of force, but applied to everyday life, choosing carefully where to invest your energy. A practical example: instead of responding immediately to every message, cultivate breaks. Not for the sake of playing games, but because you're busy building something real. This not only increases your value in the eyes of others, but also fosters silent respect. Consider how great historical figures acted. Leaders who knew their presence should be measured, never trivialized. A statesman who appears only when needed, not when begged, is remembered as indispensable. Similarly, in intimacy, it is rarity that sustains enchantment. One encounter filled with intensity is worth more than 100 lukewarm interactions. This connects directly to what Machiavelli called decisions based on true human nature. People value what seems to slip through their fingers. Excess breeds comfort, comfort breeds disdain. Selective presence, however, creates respect, curiosity, and desire. Therefore, those who learn to become the prize don't need cheap tricks. The very density of their lives, readings, discipline, loyal friends, accomplished works, is the scarcity that magnetizes. Machiavelli would say that this is true power, not begging to be chosen, but structuring an inner empire where every choice of presence or absence is strategic. And just as in politics, the ruler must master the art of appearing and disappearing at the right moment. In the realm of desire, the rule is the same. But be careful. If the prize is too invisible, it loses the game. If it is too abundant, it also wears out. Where, then, can we find balance? Perhaps the answer lies in something even more subtle, expressed not in words, but in silence. The first rule seems simple, but it's one of the most difficult to apply. Become the prize. This means reversing the logic most people live by. Instead of chasing after it, stop and build a life that makes others realize you're the one carrying the value. Machiavelli already taught that politics is guided by reality, not ideals, and reality is harsh. No one wants what's too easy. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the means is learning to use scarcity as a weapon. Selective presence, solid projects, and an authentic purpose transform an ordinary person into a rarity. And rarity, as we already know, always arouses desire. But be careful. Being the prize isn't about playing hard to get. That would be just another mask without virtue. It's something deeper. It's about having a rich life, rich in experiences, achievements, learning, and silences that create magnetism. Those who focus on what truly matters don't need to shout about their worth, because the very energy they carry already demonstrates it. Think of someone who studies, travels, takes care of their body, reads classic authors, and makes decisions based on true human nature. This person doesn't need to beg for attention. They radiate value. Just as a prince with his own loyal armies doesn't depend on fragile allies, those who build an inner empire don't depend on external approval. Consider the contrast. Those who chase after communicate inner scarcity, while those who walk in their own purpose communicate silent abundance. And here comes one of Machiavelli's sharpest lessons. It is better to be feared than loved, but never hated. This means that the prize needs to be measured in its presence. If it is too invisible, it disappears. If it is too accessible, it becomes banal. It is the calculated use of force applied to human relationships, appearing when its presence has an impact, retreating when it might lose value. It's like a work of art. The collector desires it precisely because he or she cannot always have it. Want a practical example? Imagine you're meeting someone. Instead of always being available, fill your routine with your own projects. Study political philosophy, play a sport, invest in shares of solid companies, build something you're proud of. This creates density. Then, when you show up, the energy is completely different. You bring news, stories, achievements, even silence is charged with intensity. This selective presence is an aphrodisiac because it can't be replicated. It's true fortune, when the mere fact of being there is already an event. The invisible prize doesn't beg for validation, doesn't chase, doesn't beg to be seen. It dedicates itself to building a life so full of purpose that others inevitably notice, and when they do, desire comes naturally. The secret is this: stop orbiting around others and start orbiting around yourself. The prize creates rarity, and rarity creates power. But there's something even more seductive than being rare: being enigmatic. After all, what's the point of being valuable if everyone already believes they know you completely? Mystery, this calculated silence, can be even more devastating. If the invisible prize attracts attention due to its scarcity, silence is what keeps the flame burning. Machiavelli reminds us that decisions should be guided by reality, not ideals. And the reality is clear: those who reveal everything lose power. Mystery is a refined form of virtue because it keeps others in constant speculation. The end justifies the means, even in seduction. And here the means is the art of not giving everything away at once. When someone reveals only layers, as if they were a book that cannot be read in one sitting, desire multiplies. It is better to be feared than loved when it comes to preserving secrets. But secrecy can also be the bridge to fascination. The silence that seduces isn't a lack of communication. It's a strategic choice of what to show and what to hide. Think of a leader who, faced with chaos, doesn't reveal all his cards immediately. He guards internal relics, balancing information like someone controlling his own loyal armies. The calculated use of force also applies to words. Saying less than one knows, holding back the urge to over-explain, creating spaces for others to imagine. And what the imagination creates is often more powerful than any naked truth. This is how mystery fuels desire. It transforms the banal into the rare. Want to see how this works in practice? Think of someone you admire. Notice how they don't spill the beans. They share stories in just the right measure, leave questions hanging, and cultivate silences full of meaning. It's like when an artist releases just a preview of their work, the audience goes crazy trying to guess the rest. Similarly, when dealing with someone, you don't need to expose every detail of your life or reveal all your weaknesses. It's not coldness, it's a policy guided by reality. People value what requires effort to uncover. Silence also protects. Machiavelli said it's essential to avoid being hated, and a misplaced word can turn love into resentment. By speaking less, you reduce the risk of giving ammunition to those who might use it against you. Think of how many relationships, businesses, or friendships have collapsed not from a lack of love, but from an excess of ill-measured words. Silence, in this sense, is like a well-built fortress. It creates invisible boundaries, strengthens your presence, and, paradoxically, increases curiosity. Desire grows because there's always something to be discovered. This silence isn't emptiness, it's density. It's presence without noise, an aura without explanation. It's a form of constant adaptability, knowing when to speak, when to be silent, when to laugh, when to simply observe. Ultimately, it's the art of guiding desire without ever becoming predictable. But be careful. Mystery without warmth can become distance. The balance between revealing and concealing is what sustains enchantment. And it's at this point that a new layer emerges. How to maintain this seduction without losing humanity. How to be mysterious without being inaccessible. Perhaps the answer lies in the next slide, where we learn that even coldness can be a weapon, as long as it's controlled. Controlled coolness is not the absence of emotion, it is governance over it. Machiavelli teaches us that politics is guided by reality, not ideals. And the reality is that those who do not govern their own impulses will always be governed by others. The end justifies the means, And in this case, the means is self-control. Not despairing when ignored, not becoming exalted in the face of rejection, not begging for validation. It is better to be feared than loved when it comes to respect. But to avoid crossing the line, it is vital to avoid being hated. Coolness, when balanced, conveys stability amidst chaos, and this stability is seductive because it is rare. Imagine someone who, when faced with provocation, doesn't react aggressively, but with a firm gaze and strategic silence. This is the calculated use of force, not wasting energy on petty battles. Just as a ruler maintains loyal armies of his own, ready for combat only when necessary, those who practice controlled coolness reserve their emotions for what truly matters. It's not about indifference, but about discipline. It's like holding the reins of a wild horse. If you lose control, it drags you. If you dominate, it becomes your greatest strength. This self-governance generates something magnetic. In a world where everyone rushes to express their feelings on social media, where the slightest rejection is treated as a tragedy, those who demonstrate calm become the exception. Decisions based on true human nature show that people desire what seems unattainable, and nothing is more difficult to achieve than true serenity. By loving without begging, by feeling without losing your bearings, you convey security. And security is an aphrodisiac because it's rare. Those who practice this coolness become a rock amidst the waves. In practice, applying controlled coolness can be simple, but it requires practice. When you receive a message that irritates you, take a deep breath and wait before responding. If someone provokes you, transform your anger into silent observation. If you feel the urge to beg for attention, redirect your energy toward building something of your own, a book you want to write, a physical workout, an investment. This constant adaptability is what turns chaos into fuel. It's not about stifling emotions, but about taming them. Those who do this stand out because they refuse to be slaves to their own impulsiveness. Controlled coolness is, therefore, an invisible crown. It sets the tone of leadership, dignity, and magnetism. But it needs a complement to avoid drying up, the invisible limit. Because what's the point of controlling your own emotions if you don't know where your territory ends and someone else's begins? Those who don't establish boundaries end up being slowly eroded, even if they possess virtue. And it is precisely in this balance between self-control and the silent imposition of limits that desire finds its most intense form. If controlled coolness is the inner domain, the invisible limit is the outer shield. Machiavelli once said that politics is guided by reality, not ideals, and reality shows that those who don't know how to set limits will sooner or later be devoured by others' expectations. The end justifies the means, and in this case the means is simple, saying no without apologizing for existing. It's better to be feared than loved when it comes to respect, but always taking care to avoid being hated. This balance arises from the ability to erect silent boundaries, those that don't require fiery speeches but are felt in every firm gesture. Limits don't alienate, quite the opposite. They create desire. Think of someone who always gives in, always accepts, always bends to be chosen. At first, they may even receive attention, but they soon become predictable, fragile, and unmagical. Now, compare that with someone who, faced with an absurd request, smiles and calmly responds, "I can't do that." This serenity is virtue in action. It's the calculated use of force, not violence but firmness. And firmness, like loyal armies, protects dignity and increases respect. Those who set limits never diminish themselves. On the contrary, they grow in the eyes of those who observe. A practical example? Relationships. How many times has someone accepted crumbs just to not lose someone else's presence? But true human nature shows that no one values what doesn't impose conditions. It's the old logic. The cheaper the ticket, the less exclusive the spectacle seems. Limits act like an entry code, few have access, and this increases the value. Machiavelli would say that a wise ruler controls his territory firmly, and in everyday life, territory is his soul. Those who give up this space for fear of losing it end up losing themselves. Setting boundaries is also an act of self-love. It's a policy guided by the heart's reality. If you don't respect yourself, no one will. Saying no doesn't mean rejecting. It means preserving. It's like in war. You don't send troops into every battle, only the ones that matter. Constant adaptability means knowing what deserves your energy and what needs to be discarded. This applies to friendships, work, love, and even family. The invisible boundary isn't a cold wall, but a subtle force field. Those who deserve it stay, those who don't respect it leave. And the most fascinating thing is that when the limit is real, it generates admiration rather than alienation. Quiet dignity attracts because it conveys security. Those who impose boundaries show they have an inner empire to protect, and that is irresistible. But the game doesn't end there, for while the limits protect, something greater is still needed to guide each step. A mission that transcends all need, something that gives meaning even when desire falters. Because true power is not just holding territory, but building an inner kingdom. And that is where the final blade emerges. There comes a point where it's not enough to simply be the prize, cultivate silence, practice coolness, and set limits. You must be self-sovereign. Machiavelli taught us that politics is guided by reality, not ideals, and each person's inner reality demands leadership. The end justifies the means, and here the means is to place the mission above need. Those who live for the sake of being chosen lose themselves. Those who build purpose, discipline, and direction build an inner empire. It's better to be feared than loved when it comes to inner weaknesses, but always be careful to avoid being hated for yourself. Self-abandonment is the worst form of tyranny. The sovereign self doesn't orbit life around another person. He cultivates virtue and fortune by investing in projects that elevate him, in routines that strengthen him, in values that guide him. Just as a prince needs his own loyal armies to guarantee his independence, the individual needs solid habits and unshakable convictions to avoid depending on external validation. Decisions based on true human nature show that desire is volatile, but the mission is permanent. Those who put their mission before their needs don't get lost in the whims of the moment, but keep their compass steady, even when everything seems to be falling apart. A clear example. Think of someone who enters a relationship without personal purpose. Soon, they begin living solely for the other person, abandoning dreams, projects, and even friends. The result? They lose their value precisely because they've ceased to be their own sovereign. Now compare that to someone who continues investing in their career, studying, taking care of their body, and nourishing their mind with books by Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, or Napoleon Hill. This person never loses their magnetism because they don't live just to receive love, but to build a legacy. It's constant adaptability, adjusting to the other person without ever abandoning their own center. Mission is also what gives us the courage to weather storms. When life seems to spin in a void, it is mission that reminds us that pain has meaning. Machiavelli said that a ruler needs a purpose greater than his own ego, and the same is true for those who seek desire and respect. The calculated use of force, in this case, is the inner strength to choose oneself daily, even when it would be easier to give in. Love is beautiful, but loving without losing sovereignty is even more powerful. He who governs himself is inevitably respected because he exudes integrity. Being sovereign over oneself is ultimately building an inner empire. There is no emptiness because each day is filled with discipline, direction, and dignity. There is no dependence because the source of energy is not in another body, but in one's own heart. And there is no fear of loss because those with a mission never lose, they only redirect. This is where the 5 blades unite. Wholeness before desire, mystery as density, emotional self-governance, true limits, and a mission that walks hand in hand with love. But before revealing how all this is woven into a single thread, it is worth revisiting each blade as if they were sharp swords pointing inward. Looking back, we realize that each rule is not just isolated advice, but a blade that cuts through inner layers. Machiavelli, who understood like few others that politics is guided by reality, not ideals, would have called this realism applied to the soul. The end justifies the means, and the means you've learned so far are not for manipulating others, but for reclaiming your own center. Wholeness before desire, becoming the prize, mystery as density, cultivating silence, emotional self-governance, practicing controlled coolness, true limits, erecting invisible boundaries, and mission above need, being sovereign over oneself. Each blade points inward, reminding us that whoever masters themselves masters the game. It's not about magic formulas, but about virtue, that energy that arises when you decide to live with purpose and dignity. It's better to be feared than loved when it comes to respect, but it's even wiser to avoid being hated, especially by yourself. The 5 blades aren't about toughness, but about quiet strength. Imagine yourself as a ruler of an invisible kingdom. Your own loyal armies are your habits, your discipline, your vision of the future. Every decision based on true human nature protects you from illusions, because those who live trapped in fragile ideals inevitably break in the face of reality. In practice, this means choosing where to invest your energy every day. The calculated use of force isn't shouting, but choosing when to be silent. It's not over-offering, but measuring presence. It's not begging, but walking firmly, even alone. It's constant adaptability, understanding that some days you'll need to appear like the sun, on others disappear like a shadow. Life, as Machiavelli taught, is a silent war. And in this war, those who have direction are not lost. Each blade is a tool to traverse not only the field of desire, but also the labyrinths of the soul itself. Notice how everything fits together. When you become whole, desire doesn't corrode you. When you cultivate mystery, others draw closer. When you control your emotions, nothing knocks you down. When you set boundaries, no one invades you. When you follow your mission, nothing distracts you. The invisible prize, the seductive silence, the controlled coolness, the invisible limit and self-sovereignty are not fleeting techniques but fundamentals that transform. It's as if each blade were a piece of armor, and together they form an impenetrable shield against mediocrity. And yet, there's a crucial detail. These blades aren't just for dealing with others, but primarily for sustaining yourself when the world falls apart. They are internal keys, not external tricks. They are tools for creating a life no one can take away from you. Because in the end, the greatest power is to build an inner empire so solid that neither desire, nor absence, nor rejection can shake it. But now an inevitable question remains. How can we transform these blades into daily practice so they don't remain just theory? This is precisely where the invitation to profound change comes in. Now that you've covered each of the 5 blades, the question remains, what will you do with this knowledge? Machiavelli once said that politics is guided by reality, not ideals. And the reality is that most people listen but don't apply. The end justifies the means when the means is action. You've already understood that rarity breeds desire, that silence is power, that controlled coolness is respect, that invisible boundaries protect, and that self-sovereignty builds an inner empire. But nothing changes if you continue living the same way. Take a good look at your life. How many times have you bowed down to avoid losing someone? How many times have you swallowed the no you wanted to say just to maintain the illusion of being loved? How many times have you forgotten your plans, your own loyal armies, just to sustain an empty relationship? Decisions based on real human nature show that this always ends in the same place. Loss of respect, loss of value, loss of self. It's better to be feared than loved when it comes to not being reduced to crumbs. Now imagine the opposite, you, whole, magnetic, cultivating virtù and fortuna, imposing invisible limits, using silence as a weapon and mission as a crown. The calculated use of force would no longer be outside, but within. Constant adaptability would cease to be an abstract concept and become a daily practice, choosing yourself in every gesture, in every decision. This is the path to never again begging for love, but to walking side by side with it. And I challenge you, which of these blades do you need to apply today? Which one most exposed the wound you try to hide? Is it the invisible prize you never dared to be? The silence you fear to cultivate? The coldness you haven't yet mastered? The limit you avoid imposing, or the mission you abandoned? Don't answer me, answer yourself, because change only begins when you face your own cowardice head-on. If something has awakened within you, don't let it die. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and write in the comments which of these blades cut your soul the most today. Don't underestimate this gesture. Sometimes a comment is just the first whisper back home, and remember, those who govern themselves need not beg for other people's thrones. They already carry an empire within themselves.